guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to do another video on sex and marriage because I got some good feedback from the first one. So I wanted to continue to make these until I feel like I've said everything I need to say on the subject. So this one is Sex and Marriage Part 2, and it is the telos of the feminine, even though I spelled it wrong. So, in the last video I looked at the text surrounding sex and marriage, and then kind of went off on what does that mean about same-sex marriage, like how does that fit in, and the conclusion I came to, at least for me, is that biblical sex and marriage is the reunification of the masculine and feminine in both spirit and flesh. And as I said, I got some good feedback on that, and I want to just kind of break down what is really the telos of the feminine spirit, at least from my perspective. So, there was a video from Randos United. Let's see who was in it. There was Luke, Cassidy, Sam Adams, Sarah, and Tripp. And the name of it was Made to Marry, where they discuss singleness and what that means, like how the church handles it. And I just thought it was a very good discussion that got me to thinking about, well, what really is the telos of the feminine outside of marriage? And the reason it got me to thinking about that is because, like, biblically, yes, you see that most women in the Bible are married, and there seems to be a stigma in some evangelical church circles that, you know, if by a certain age a woman's not married, then there's a problem. But for me, I don't think we can really discuss what sex and marriage is if I see it as a reunification of masculine and feminine and spirit until I know what feminine spirit outside of marriage is. So that's kind of the angle I want to take with it. But first I thought maybe I should read through some of the text again so that we kind of latch back on to last week's video, or whichever week that was. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs, maybe, and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man and brought her to the man. So, in verse 20 is kind of where I want to hone in, because we see that no suitable helper was found for Adam was found. Now to me this word is telling, as it gives us a clue nested inside the creation story of what the telos of woman, I don't want to say is, even though that says is, might be. And I think helper is a good umbrella to talk about the feminine spirit and how it applies both inside and outside of the marriage. So, inside of the frame of marriage, woman being helper can include being receptive of the seed of the man in order to create new life, and it can also include being the helper of their children, and to create an atmosphere of rest in the home. And a lot more. This is a small snippet of what women actually do inside of marriage, but it's full enough to understand that role as it pertains to marriage. So, how does the telos of helper extend outside of the marriage framework? What does it look like in singleness? Well, for men, we encounter this through our lives without giving much notice. First place we see it is our mother. And we encounter it not only with how she is in relation to our fathers, but to her children and to women outside of the home. So, like, we see the relational aspect of women in that. And we encounter it later in relation to other women, both romantically and non-romantically. Women in the spirit of femininity are always being helpers in the world in ways that largely go overlooked. If a man is smart, when he has an idea that has something missing, he seeks the advice of a woman. Women can teach us to be relational, to see that ideas have an impact on persons, and that fact can be hard for men to grasp sometimes. So, like in some of these videos that I do, if I'm struggling with it, I take this PowerPoint presentation to my wife and I let her look at it and I say, like, I feel like something's missing, and she can always give such a good, valid input. But I feel like even if my wife were not here, there could be other women that I'm non-romantically involved with that I could just run this by them and say, I feel like something's missing out of this. Like, what am I not getting? And I can gain a whole different perspective on that than I would have just if I went with it. So that is extremely helpful, and I think that falls under the telos of helper. Women are good at organizing in people and resources to a project. There is a project that I can't talk very much about right now, but I can say that there are some women at the forefront of this project that are really doing phenomenal work in bringing together people and resources to make this project not only work but excel. Single women oftentimes have more time to be in relation to young women and girls, which can benefit greatly to the mothers of these young women and girls. Like, it's especially if you have, let's say you have a mother that has some mildly to fairly little bit older teenagers and some young ones at home. Well, it's harder for her to be as relational to the older ones because she has younger ones that she's dealing with. And let's say those girls just happen to need a little side mentoring. Well, if there's young single ladies in the church that these other young teenage girls can look up to and just, have coffee and conversation with, that's something that's a huge help to them and to the mothers. And I don't necessarily know that the church taps into that all the time. This took me a good long while to grasp and understand what really is a spirit of feminine outside of marriage. And if only because I've been married for so long that it just, even though I have a teenage daughter, it's like for me to look at that and try to really grasp that is difficult. In response to the Randos United video, I would say that it would be best if the church understood what a driving helpful force single women can offer to the church. And I think, like I said, that's like innumerously important. It's like not all the married women in the church can make the time to do things like pool people and resources together to get a project done. You know, these single women could be innumerably helpful in VBS. They could be helpful in just mentoring some of the young ladies in the youth program. They could be helpful as missionaries if they were called and led to do that. There's just so many things that I think a lot of these single young ladies at the church might really want to sink their teeth into and get involved in, and feel like the church isn't shunning them, and that they can make a good, valid contribution to the church. And so that's where I would have to leave that one. But so in conclusion, I would say that helpful spirit, that word, that helper, it's a good umbrella term for what a feminine spirit is and how it applies both inside of a marriage framework and outside of it in innumerable ways that, you know, we risk overlooking all the time. And I would say don't overlook that. And I'm sure I'll have more on this subject to come, but that's all I have for now, guys. As always, thanks for watching.